Hey, this is Les from the TV Dudes. As part of our special coverage of Austin Film Festival's 26th year, I was lucky enough to sit down and chat with writer Jeff Lieber. We talk a bit about his history with the show Lost, before moving on to his career writing for shows such as Necessary Roughness, Impulse, and much more. Jeff is one of my favorite people to talk to, and it's a really fun interview. I hope you enjoy. Les Weiler for the TV Dudes, and I'm lucky enough to be chatting with Jeff Lieber. Is it Lieber or Lieber? Lieber.
The thing I learned many years back, which you didn't know, is German, the sound you hear first comes second.
Yes. Yeah. So my last name works exactly the same. It's Weiler, E-I. And yeah, when I was a kid, the two vowels go a walk and the second one does the talking. I think is what my grandparents told me. Does not actually work in English.
No, right, exactly. That's the problem.
So we talked a little bit about this on email. One of the first credits that pops up for you when I started to research you is Lost. But like so many of our favorite movies and TV shows, and there's a storied history of how projects get from gestation to screen. And some things die in turnaround, some things have total staff changes. In your case, you will be forever dogged by questions about a show that you were involved in very early on, and then not involved in as things go. Can you talk a bit about, as a writer, working in your career, it's not a failure, but it's not a success that you want to...
Totally.
It's not laurels you want to rest on at the same time. What was it like to be in a space where you didn't necessarily just get shot down, but you didn't exactly succeed the way you wanted, but you've got to just put it aside and move to the next project?
Well, it took me a fair amount of time in therapy to learn. When people would say to me, hey, congratulations, I lost, I would go into this long story, which is, hey, okay, so what happened was, and 2.5 minutes later, I would look at the person and they would just sort of give me this glazed over look of like, oh, that's too much information. After a bunch of therapy, I went, thank you. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is that the longer you get in your career, the more, as you say, every story, every script that's made or not made has this long narrative that includes these moments of disappointment or excitement, or there are things that I've written that I'm incredibly proud of that no one knows exist. There are things that I've written that people associate me with, which I have no emotional primal relationship with. And Lost is a funny in between of those two things. I have a very specific experience about writing the pilot for that, and it means a lot to me. But I can take no credit or get no blame for people who come up and they say to me, "Explain the ending," and I'm saying I have no idea as well.
Yeah, that's years after.
Totally.
Guys. You were a playwright and an actor, and I am often amazed by the difference between acting on stage and acting on a camera. But there's also I feel like a difference in the way language works often in plays. And there's times where I watch movies by like David Mamet, and I think his movie sounds like a play.
Right.
And I don't know what that means precisely, but there's some cadence to the language or something different for me in theater. For yourself as a writer moving between these, did you ever have that sense that?
There's a couple things. First of all, just the simple distance is important. Like when you watch a play, you're at a distance from somebody. So language that flows in these long sentences that move to another don't feel as weird when you have a little space. When a camera's right in your face and all of a sudden you start talking, you become very aware of that. The other thing is, theater is a live medium in which, you just get up there and you start, and then one thing rolls into another, and you can't cut or move around or any of those sorts of things. When you have the ability to cut between takes and rewrite in editing, just the way language is used becomes much more fungible in some ways. it was a big transition. When I moved from Chicago to LA, I had one screenplay written, and I handed it to someone, and they stared at these long passages of dialogue with sort of this,
big chunks of text on the page.
And they sort of said to me, "What is this?" And the reaction was, "You clearly are a good writer, but you haven't figured out what the medium looks like." It was so funny. I had the experience about 6 weeks ago of reading a play for the first time in maybe a decade. I mean, really, just because of my workflow, I haven't been able to. And it was disorienting.
Jarring for you?
Yeah, it was totally. I was like, when will these people shut up? And I was like, oh, no. This is a play, this is how it works.
That's great. Do you feel like your experience as an actor influenced what you do as a writer?
Oh, yeah.
Do you not give yourself certain lines or give people certain lines?
Well, I'm both incredibly sympathetic to actors. Like, I'm a big proponent of when you do an audition scene, it's less than 2 pages, because I'm really aware of what the process is for them. I also am aware, when I read other people's stuff, the difference between people who understand that dialogue is communication and emotion, and people who are still writing dialogue to get to the next plot point. So when you can feel that dialogue, which is intended to get you to a moment so you can get to another moment, and you... I do these dumb showrunner rules on Twitter, and one of them is, if you go through your script and you black out all the character names, you should still be able to tell who's talking at any moment. And if you can't tell who's talking at any moment, then go back and rewrite, because
you have two of the same.
Or everybody becomes a dialogue delivery system. Now, like Sorkin would say to me, fuck you, I'm going to do whatever I want to do.
Fine for him.
Right. And everyone writes this, everyone speaks in some version of, or at least of a cadence, but I do believe that when you want dialogue to feel like a character, you have to figure out what the difference between this character and that character.
Yeah, I spoke to Nora Nolan, who wrote on Trial and Error yesterday, and she brought up that exact point of one of her favorite things about that show was the specificity of the characters. There were no jokes that could be moved between people.
Right.
If this was your joke, only your character could say it, and that it speaks well to that of.
And some kind of writing, more procedural television, that doesn't totally hold true. But I do find that if you can move stuff just randomly between characters, either the information is not that important, or you're not giving the characters their due.
Yeah. Surely that's, you got an expo dump. You're moving around somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You talked about shows that you love and projects that end up in a drawer somewhere. They're paid for. Somebody bought it, but never going to be made. When you look back on your career, what separates those projects? What do you find yourself falling in love with when you work on it?
I have this. It doesn't take me a lot to get excited about stuff, which is a problem sometimes, because people come to me with ideas, and I'll just find the thing that is interesting to me and dig in on that. And at times, people, my manager, my agents, have said to me, like, "Well, okay, but this is what that is, right? It's just this, or it's not. The project doesn't have this set of auspices, or that's it." But I just find stuff that's really kind of fascinating to me, and it becomes. I just wrote this Quibi show that was brought to me by a very good friend of mine, who's one of the first people I met when I moved to LA, and it's an
adaptation, right?
No, it's a young writer named Charlie McDonald had started an idea about a girl who realizes she's the first piece of AI that is indistinguishable to both the world and to herself. And it was a piece of digital short form that started out, but I have a daughter who's 17, I have a son who's 15, and I just got really fascinated with the idea that AI and children are not that dissimilar. They have programming, they have their free will, they have their machine learning, and the only difference, and my kids have struggled with what they got from us, their parents, what they got, what's their own, and so I just get into those sort of ideas, and then I, have to try to make something of the project into being about that.
I definitely get that. I know what you mean on that sense of there's some grain in nearly anything that I can latch onto and get fascinated. And I think the only people that really kind of freak me out are people who just aren't curious for whatever reason. And like in high school, when somebody would be like, I don't know, I don't really listen to music. Like, I don't know if I really trust you anymore. And kind of similarly, like if people don't, if I don't see that light go off sometimes in people's eyes when we're talking about just an abstract idea, like that's not crazy to you.
Some people are better at least being able to say, I feel like I have an artistic boundarylessness because I'm like, oh, that's cool. I can find something here. And I think some people are better and have defined their careers a little better about being like, this is my area.
Yeah.
These are the things I do well. I'm into sci-fi, or I'm into, or they have things that they do and that they have a language for their career. I haven't pulled that off yet.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had one lane that I loved to the exclusion of all others. And yeah, I'm on a TV podcast where we often talk about genre stuff, but then we'll do a week where we talk about what we're all watching, and I'm like, have y'all seen The Good Wife? It's fantastic.
Do you have a moment in your growing up that you define as like, this is the thing I saw that made me go, oh?
Cat's Cradle.
Oh, really?
The book. Somebody gave me Cat's Cradle at the exact right moment in my adolescence, of like really struggling with some like, a lot of adults I know are absolute fuck ups, and what do I do with that safety net gone?
Right.
And Cat's Cradle was a very desolate kind of, but Vonnegut's there's such a laugh to the like, hey, there's no point in anything. We're all going to die.
Right. And did you know at that moment? Meaning, some people have a sort of a light goes on and they go, "Oh my God, I'm in!" Right? And some people have something that they experience, and then much later they look back and go, "Oh, that was the moment."
I think I knew then that book was saving me.
It was important.
And it wasn't until like I think in college when I realized that I had reread it a lot and was like, okay, Vonnegut's apparently my guy.
Yeah.
Falling in love with television was different from I just had a conversation with someone about holding technology against the content. I like Screw Top Wine. Perfectly good. Right. Doesn't have anything to do with what's in the bottle.
No, there's even now apparently there's box wines that are not terrible.
Just perfectly good. Just a delivery method. Yeah. I knew I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to be a storyteller. I could never get my head around. It was always novelist or playwright. Movies underneath that, and then television was somewhere below that. If you just couldn't do the others, and years of butting against that bias in my head.
Well, but the bias was somewhat justified. I mean,
when I was growing up, TV was not the stuff that dropped my jaw and brought tears to my eyes.
I play a game sometimes, which is to say, drop a pin on The Sopranos, right, and where it is in time. Before The Sopranos, it's very hard to come up with 12 series that you can recommend soup to nuts, beginning to end, and say watch the whole TV show.
Don't skip any. There's no 17th episode.
Right,
it's just
exactly.
a filler.
And then from Sopranos forward, there are 300 of them that are, and I think that is you could just feel that moment happen. And so I get that some of it may have been biased on your part, but also somewhat justified.
Yeah, I remember seeing Murder One come out while I was in high school. Stephen Bocho, Stanley Tucci was on it, and there was a big thing about it. It was a single case across the whole season, and there was a lot of actual argument about whether you could have an audience do that because what if you missed 1 week and you didn't have a VCR?
Right,
it's the friggin' 90s, and I didn't realize it at the time. I really enjoyed that show. My parents watched it. It was a family evening. I didn't really understand at the time how much that and the ongoing arcs in stuff like Quantum Leap were what I liked about television.
Right. Totally.
And so, then years later, as we're definitely in peak TV, those are the things that when I see a show, I always want there to be a big arc.
Right. And we're about to then do this other shift, which is that we're going to lose control entirely of what the delivery mechanism is. And so the line between what is a film and what is TV is already just kind of falling apart.
Yeah, Spielberg
in front of us. Yeah,
Spielberg's ran about it a year ago or so with Netflix blurring that line. Like, I don't know what an event series is versus a miniseries versus an anthology show. These things are, the labels are so new.
The thing we've lost, the only thing that I think we've lost is that it may have been Sopranos, end of Breaking Bad, but even that, where there was sort of a cultural experience of a moment where everyone was in the same boat. Yeah. I mean, I remember very specifically when The Sopranos ended. I remember where I was sitting. Yeah. I remember when that music cue hit and when it went dark and feeling the collective experience of confusion where people were like, is that the end?
Is it my TV break?
Did my TV break? Right. And so we are sort of being denied a little of that. Though I guess sort of the Marvel movies or those kinds of things still have a little bit of that feeling to it.
Yeah. It is much harder, I feel like, now to be a water cooler show.
Yeah, totally.
It just doesn't happen. And while I love that TV is my schedule and not its schedule anymore, I mean, the idea of me having to arrange my life around a TV appointment is nuts to me now. But it destroys that. Show up to work on Monday and talk about Game of Thrones.
Though I mean,
we still did it.
We certainly when the room starts on Monday morning, there's a game of, hey, who's caught up on what, and have you seen? And
then I'm not going to talk about Good Place.
Right, exactly. So there's some of that, but it doesn't. Again, there are these moments in time that again, given my relationship with Lost, I wasn't tracking it, but the end of Lost, I think, had that moment to it as well.
Yeah, we actually went over to a friend's house to watch that, and that whole show, there was a lot of. I had at least 3 discussions at keg parties about Lost.
Yeah.
Where like you'd walk up on a group of people who were all nerding, I mean, deep nerd discussion. And I don't want to pine nostalgic for lack of options of variety on television, because that definitely lent to, which network did you watch last night? Because I know you watched one of the 4, and do you watch NBC or CBS?
I'll be interested to see that with the emergence of these many streaming services, whether what happened was broadcasting. Concept of broad being 12 million, 15 million viewers requires you to have a certain kind of vanilla-ness to it, because you have to appeal to a broad audience.
Yeah.
So you can't. And so all the quality stuff went to cable, whereby if you had 3 million people, you were a big hit. Now that we're moving to this sort of new medium, I'm curious to see if the money, the large corporate interests, the major networks, can figure out a way to do quality television in a non-broadcasting. They have resources on one side. Now, can they figure out how to use those resources towards sort of interesting niche television that
I know they've got the data on me.
Yeah,
I mean,
they do. They know,
and they've got it.
They know we're sitting here.
Yeah, Shudder can send out just horror to me or something like that. One of the funniest quotes I've ever heard was one of the 3 guys from Pirate Bay a few years ago during their court case said, "I don't understand why everybody's so mad. I fixed your delivery system. Say thank you." And I was like, "Oh shit, man! Yeah, you kind of gave them a way to just hand me television without involving a cable company or any middleman. You could just NBC could just hand me the show,
right.
And we're not anywhere close to the implications of that being realized.
No,
I don't think.
No, and I'm super curious, just as a person who makes my living doing this, as to how this sort of multiple. I mean, in some ways, we're just reshuffling the deck. Everything's just moving around. Friends is going to go from Netflix back to
NBC's thing.
NBC's thing, and so it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I mean, Netflix did take advantage for a long time on everybody else's old stuff. Now we're going to see if they can, make it work.
Yeah, if they've been planning in advance well enough to do it.
Right.
And thank you so much for chatting with me.
Hey, I really appreciate it, and I thank you for seeking me out. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast and a member of the Electric Sweater Podcast Network. We are exclusively listener supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/TV Dudes. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter at TV Dudes. All the music for our show is by our friend and original TV Dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith. To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com and electricsweater.com. I'm Grant Davis. Thanks for listening.